iPlace presents in-person interview preparation.
Hey! Congratulations on getting shortlisted for the interview. A lot of times, people have great resumes but don't clear interviews. On the other hand, some people have not so great resumes but do really well at the interview and manage to get the job, even though their resume wasn't the best. You see, your resume can get you to the table, but the interview decides whether you get the job. Now, I'm pretty sure you've been to interviews before and may know the tips and tricks to clear interviews. Or this may be your first interview after a very long time. Or your first interview ever. Whichever it is, if you'd stick around for a few minutes, I'm pretty sure you'll hear something you haven't heard before. We're going to discuss the things you need to know to ace this interview and give you the edge over your competitors. For starters, let's quickly go over a few common best practices for in-person interviews. After that, we'll get to the details of preparation. Firstly, pick out a suitable outfit a day or two before the interview. If you haven't been told the dress code for the interview, check online for pictures to see how the employees of the company dress at work. If casual attire is the norm, then a dress shirt and formal pants are a good option whether you're a man or a woman. If business formals are the norm, then dress accordingly and make sure you suit up. To make a great first impression, don't forget the little things. Clean your shoes, make sure your nails are clean and tidy, and check your clothes for loose threads and holes, stains, and pet hair. Make sure your cell phone is charged in case you need to use your GPS to get to the location. But switch your cell phone to silent mode when you reach the location of the interview. You definitely wouldn't want your cell phone buzzing or ringing in the middle of your interview. Leave early from home to avoid being late because of traffic and to also find a good parking spot. If the interview location is not an area you're familiar with, do a dry run if possible. Drive down to the location a day or two in advance to get familiar with the area and to know where to park. And if you're taking public transportation, identify a backup plan if there are delays or closures. You wouldn't want to be lost on the day of the interview and turn up late. That's a huge negative, and a lot of hiring managers will not even proceed with conducting the interview if you're late. Now, emergencies do come up last minute, and if that happens, make sure you call and inform before the scheduled time if possible. Explain the situation and request a reschedule. You see, companies often blacklist people who are no-call, no-shows. This is very important. Know your resume. The interviewer will not be impressed if you have your resume professionally written out but are not familiar with what it says. References are important, and you should prepare a list in advance. Most interviewers would require that you submit your references before or after your interview. So, if you have a reference list prepared ahead of time, this will help you to quickly complete the step and move forward in the hiring process. In addition to references, there are a few more items that you should carry along with you. 5 or 6 copies of your printed resume because you may have multiple interviewers, even if that has not been communicated in advance. Keep a copy for yourself so you can refer to it during the interview, and highlight the relevant accomplishments on your copy to ensure that you don't miss out on mentioning something crucial to this role. Also, bring a pen and a small notebook so you can take quick notes when the interviewer gives you important information. You can later refer to these notes and include the pertinent details in your post-interview thank you note. Best not to use a smartphone or another electronic device to take notes because it could come across like you're not paying attention. During your interview, ensure that your body language indicates interest and attention. Don't slouch or lean back. Lean slightly mind you, towards the interviewer, make eye contact, and smile often. When the interviewer is speaking, nod occasionally when appropriate, and give verbal cues to indicate attention. Verbal cues like, Right. To show that you're listening and paying attention to everything that's being said. You've either cleared the first interview or this is going to be the first one. Either way, preparation for all interviews is necessary. The in-person interview usually takes place on site and in most cases is the final interview. But sometimes there are additional interview rounds, and in those cases, your recruiter will keep you posted. Now let's look at a few things that'll help you ace this in-person interview. Number one, and most important, is research. Have you ever been to an interview where the hiring manager asked you what you knew about the company and you didn't really have an answer? Well, the chances of someone getting hired at a company that they don't know much about is extremely low. The more you know about the company, the higher your chances of getting hired. It shows that you've invested time in doing your research, which proves your level of interest in the job. And 6 out of 10 times, the job goes to the one who's most interested. A few things that you can research about the company include what the company does. Sometimes the interviewer will ask you to describe in your own words what you think the company does. So reviewing their website and LinkedIn page will work really well. By doing this, you'll also get to see the history of the company and the leadership team, and this information can be useful. Also, research to see how well the company is doing. This includes researching their previous year's revenue, their performance on the stock market, etc. And check if the company has been in the news lately. Sometimes, through the news, you get to know the direction the company is going in. A thorough research of the company will take some time, but it'll definitely be less than the time you would spend having to apply for and interview for other positions because you missed out on this one due to lack of preparation. So research like this is your first and last interview. Research the person who will be interviewing you, whether it's the HR representative or the hiring manager or someone else. Having something in common with the interviewer will work to your advantage. It'll help to build rapport with the interviewer. You can check out their LinkedIn profile as well as Facebook or any other social networking profile. Well, yes, don't stalk the person, but when you proactively bring up what you have in common with the interviewer, they may know what you're trying to do. So talk about it casually. Usually you can slip in what you have in common when you're asked the question, "Tell me about yourself." Now, if you have nothing in common, that's absolutely fine, but don't fake an interest or be ingenuine. Study the job description really well and make a note of the experience that you have that aligns with the job. Note down specific cases where you had to do something like lead a team or meet a deadline or fix a problem. Doing this will ensure that you don't waste a lot of time thinking of a situation when you're asked a question. On LinkedIn, you can also look at the profiles of the people that currently hold that position in the company or have previously held a position. This will give you a fair idea about the role apart from what's already mentioned in the job description. Now, after you're done with your research, you move on to the next stage of preparation, which is rehearsing your answers to the most common interview questions. Doing this will not only help you increase your confidence while answering these questions, but it'll also help you articulate your answers better. So let's look at a few common interview questions. One of the most common ones, which gets asked in 9 out of 10 interviews, is, "Tell me about yourself." Now, if you've been to a lot of interviews and know what answer charms your interviewer, use it. But if not, try to focus around 80% of your answer aligned to the position that you're interviewing for. You can say something like, "You love analyzing things," or "solving problems," or "coding," "helping people," "math," etc. And focus around 20% of your answer towards personal stuff, like what you do in your free time and what your hobbies or interests are, etc. Then there's what's your most significant accomplishment. And what was your most difficult assignment? For these, be ready to give real-life examples of your major responsibilities and accomplishments. Be specific, give details, state facts. It's not enough to discuss your accomplishments in statistical or general terms. Be prepared to discuss how you achieve those goals. Be mindful that while you're talking about these things, you don't say anything negative about any of your previous employers. You see, companies are looking for problem solvers who overcome tough situations. So if you're discouraged about your current job or have had a bad experience with a previous employer, try to focus on what you gained from that experience and how the learning will positively impact your future performance. To answer these types of questions, you should use the CAR technique. CAR is an acronym for Challenge, Action Taken, and Results. CARs are 1 or 2 minute stories that demonstrate that you can do the specific work the hiring manager needs performed and you have the behaviors the hiring manager is looking for. So it's best to prepare 2 or 3 CARs and have them ready for the interview. It's a great technique and simple to implement, and I'm going to show you how. Here's an example of a CAR for a business analyst for a hiring manager that wants people who are very proactive and focused on deadlines. I was working as a business analyst on a new application for a large government agency. Now, this project had a very tight deadline, and it was critical to start development very quickly. Right after we won the work, the government came out with a new mandate that would significantly affect the project. I spoke to the subject matter experts in our company, but none of them knew how the new mandate would be implemented. Our developers were pressing hard to get started and needed use cases. I pride myself on making sure that my team always delivers use cases on time so that the overall project will stay on schedule. So I went online and researched the new mandate. I found an expert on the new mandate on LinkedIn, and I contacted the expert. He was nice enough to talk to me about how the mandate could affect our project. He outlined 3 areas that the mandate could affect, and I prepared use cases for these 3 scenarios. The use cases were then sent to the development team 2 days ahead of schedule. So the developers were able to create an application that addressed all of the key elements of the mandate. The project was turned over to the agency 2.5 weeks ahead of schedule. And the agency was so pleased with our work that our company was awarded a sole source contract for phase 2 of the program worth $32 million. Like this example, think of a time when you were faced with a challenge and what you did to get a positive result. But also keep in mind that what interviewers find problematic is when the person being interviewed either talks too much, doesn't talk enough, or lacks confidence. So try to be as clear as possible with short answers without making your answers seem like a drag. You may be given a technical problem to solve, and in many cases, the questions you ask to get the information needed to solve the problem is as important as the solution. When asked about your experience with certain tools, skills, or techniques, don't limit your answers to yes and no. Back it up with more information. And if you don't have experience with a particular tool or skill, talk about your experience that's similar to it and show that you're willing to learn. Now, a lot of companies will ask you about your strengths and weaknesses. Strengths are easy. Just make sure they're true and are relevant to the role that you're interviewing for. If asked to, you should be able to back your strengths up with specific examples that display them. When you talk about your weaknesses, also talk about the steps you're taking to overcome them. For example, I pride myself on being all about the big picture, and I have to admit that in the past, I've sometimes missed the small details. But I now arm myself with checklists and put in a lot of effort to being organized because I've learned that the devil really is in the details. You see, the best way to handle this question is to be honest about the weakness, but turn it into a positive by showing that you're able to identify areas of improvement within yourself and work on them. Select a trait, preferably one that wouldn't have a negative impact on this position, and tell them what you're doing to overcome it. Focus on professional traits rather than personal qualities. Then there's behavioral or situational questions. The purpose behind these questions is to get details of your past abilities and specific work performance. The interviewer will then rate each response to determine how you've reacted to these situations in the past, in order to predict your future performance. Mostly the questions start with, "Tell me about a time," or "Describe," or "Give me an example of." Be mindful of how you answer these questions. So these are a few questions that most interviewers ask, and it's best to be prepared with answers. By rehearsing beforehand, you will make a strong case to show that you're the best person for the job. You should also know that these are some of the qualities that interviewers look for. Someone who's not afraid of challenges. Someone who enjoys working in teams and has outstanding communication skills. Someone who pays attention to details but doesn't get hung up on them. Someone who looks at broad issues and identifies root causes and not quick fixes. Someone who's willing to ask tough questions and seek new resources. Someone who works hard to find not just a solution, but the best solution. Someone who wants to become a leader and mentor others as well. Employers are always looking for someone who has a history of making a difference and adding value, because they make organizations stronger. Interviews are a two-way street. As the hiring manager is figuring out whether you're the best hire, you also need to find out if this is the right career move for you and ask questions that'll help you make that determination. In addition, interviewers expect you to ask questions. They want to know that you're thinking seriously about what it would be like to work there. Here are some questions you should ask your interviewers. Not all at once, mind you, but you should have the answers to these by the end of the interview. Space them out. Could you tell me about some of the day-to-day responsibilities of the job? So what are the essential characteristics or traits of someone who would succeed in this role? If I were hired in this position, how would my performance be measured and how often? Which departments does the team work with on a regular basis? A good follow-up question to this is, and how do these departments collaborate? What are the biggest challenges that you're currently facing in your role? Could you describe the company and team culture? What would I need to do on the job to make you feel in 6 months from now that I'm the best hire that you made? In your opinion, is my background and skill set in alignment with what you're looking for in the person to fill this role? Or is there any other skill or experience that you would have preferred for me to have? Now, based on the answers you get, you will either discover that this may not be the right fit, or you will be able to tell them the relevant skill and experience you do have. Now, always ask about the next steps at the end of the interview. If the interviewer is vague, be proactive and ask them if there are any requirements of the position that your answers did not satisfy. Don't be pushy, just sincere, like this. This was wonderful. I really appreciate your time. So, what are the next steps?
I need to discuss this with my superior and get back to you.
Of course. Before we end this, are there any aspects of the position that my answers didn't satisfy? Here too, based on the answer you get, you will either discover that this may not be the right fit, or you will be able to tell them the relevant skill and experience you have. Now, if the interviewer says no, don't push it, just give a nice bright smile and say goodbye. These are some really great questions that'll show your interviewer that you're interested in the job. The questions will also help you get a good understanding of the company and role, so you can make your own determination of whether this is the best career move for you. There are also some questions that are best not asked during interviews. So avoid questions about vacations and sick leaves. Anything related to salary or pay rate shouldn't be discussed with the hiring manager. During the interview, show them that compensation is not a deciding factor. Rather, do a great job on the interview and make them really want you first. Leave the discussions for after the company shows interest in hiring you and wants to discuss compensation. Avoid personal questions. All of this may seem like a lot of information and can be overwhelming, but the company liked your resume. And now it's time for them to like you. Do your research and rehearse the stuff in advance so that you can be confident during the interview. Engage your interviewer and have a conversation instead of an interrogation. And don't forget to send a well-written and professional thank you note to the interviewer within 24 hours after the interview. All the best!